Hey guys, this is Lucas from Better Coding Academy, and in this video I want to explain to you the render props pattern inside of React. So in a previous video we had a look at using higher order components, and what I'm going to do in this video is firstly use higher order components to build out a mouse tracking application, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So we're going to go here, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call this one mousetracker.js. So this is going to be a separate component. Now this component here is pretty simple. It's just going to be a mouse tracker, or more correctly, it's going to use higher order components. So it's going to take in an X and a Y prop, and all it's going to do is render those out onto the page. So we can do div, X, X, and then Y, Y like that. So we render those two out and we export default mouse tracker. Now this is really simple, and what we're going to do is create a new file, and we're going to call this one with mouse.js. So now we've got something like this, and what we can do is right inside of this file, const with mouse, and we're going to do our higher order component. So we first do a component like that, and then we do const new component is equal to, and we can write out this syntax here. Now, firstly, if you're not familiar with higher order components, I highly suggest that you watch my previous video in where I go into a lot more detail on how a higher order component works. But in this case, I'm going to assume that you've watched that video or you have previous experience with higher order components. So we're going to go here and we're going to do something just like this. We're going to do use effect and use state like that. And we're going to import these from React. And inside of here, we are going to render the component with all of the props being passed through and the props here. And we're going to go here and write const, and we can just do, say, chords and then set coordinates is equal to use state, and we're going to do x0, y0, or something like that. Now we've done that, and we can go here and we can do ... chords like that. So we pass in x and y as x and y props into our component here. So now once we've done that, we can go back into mouse tracker and let's do import with mouse from / with mouse like that, and then we can do export default with mouse tracker. So now let's save this and let's get this rendered here inside of index.js. So import mouse tracker from / mouse tracker. We're going to grab this and we are going to render it out right here. So mouse tracker, just like that. So now this will show x0, y0, and because we don't have any event listeners, it won't change that. However, we can go inside of here and we can do use effect, and let's set up an effect here. So let's make a function, call this one handle mouse move, and it's going to take the EVT, and we're going to do set chords, and we're going to do x being evt.client x and y evt.client y. So client x and client y just determine the number of pixels from the top left of the viewport. So that's what we're going to do here. Now that we have handle mouse move, we're going to do window.add event listener mouse move and then handle mouse move. Or actually, I think you probably should use document here. And here we're going to do document.remove event listener, and we're going to remove that same event listener. So now that we've done that, let's go back here and let's move it around the page, and you'll notice that it gives us our coordinates x and y. If we go right up here, we should get pretty close to 0, but that's the point here anyways. So now we can go around the page and we can get the exact coordinates. Now this is using higher order components, and this is great. However, there is a problem to this approach, which is that this higher order component has now reserved the x and the y props. So let's just say that we wanted to pass in an x and a y into our mouse tracker using something else. For example, we have this with mouse, which might be the x and the y for this purpose, and we might have another x and y, which we might also want to track and pass into mouse tracker. So I can't think of an exact example right now, but let's just say that we have our other higher order component as well. And then this higher order component does something similar because it takes in a component and it returns a new component. But basically what it does is it does return component ... props. And let's just say this one does x is equal to ASDF all the time for some reason, right? You might say this is bad component design, but I'm showing a very contrived example here. In an actual example, there might be a very good reason in which you should use the X prop here for some different value, or maybe some different prop for some purpose. So this is definitely not an uncommon example, and this is one of the biggest drawbacks to using higher order components. So anyways, let's build this one out. Keep it really, really simple. It just changes X to ASDF. And then we are also going to include that on top of with mouse. So we do other HOC and with mouse, and let's save and let's have a look. Now this won't actually change the page. Weirdly enough, it will work just fine. And the reason for that is because we've put other HOC up on the top, which means that even though this one passes in an x value of ASDF, it gets overwritten by with mouse. But if we were to swap these two around, and we do this and we do that, then you'll notice what happens is x becomes ASDF, and there's no way that we can change it back because we no longer have any control of the x value inside of with mouse. There's nothing that we can do here. What we can do is we can look at these higher order components and change the prop names. So we might call this one x2, in which case it will work just fine. However, this is not always feasible. And when you're working in a large team across maybe hundreds of developers and millions of components, for example, it isn't always practical to do this for every higher order component. So in order to solve this problem, we can use a different React pattern known as render props. Now, I must say that in a large variety of situations, render props are actually no longer the ideal solution. With React hooks being introduced, React hooks can now do what only higher order components and render props used to be able to do, but in less lines of code and in better syntax. But in any case, it's still worth knowing about higher order components, and it's still worth knowing about render prop patterns as well. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go into Mouse Tracker, and instead of doing this, we are going to use a different syntax. So specifically, we are going to change our with mouse to become a render prop component. So we're going to go here and we're going to rename this one to current mouse location and .js. We're going to grab this part here, current mouse location, and we are going to get rid of essentially a whole bunch of this code. But before we do that anyways, let's go over here. Let's get rid of our other hook as well, because we don't need that here. And let's delete this file, confirm. And we are going to go here, get rid of X and Y on the mouse tracker. And what we're going to do is we're going to import current mouse location from current mouse location, and we're going to do current mouse location like that. And inside of here, we're going to do curly braces, and then we're going to put in a function. So this is a function inside of curly braces. The curly braces represent JSX syntax, and inside of here, we are including a function as a child, which is why this pattern is sometimes called render props, and it's also sometimes called function as a child, so FAAC. So what we're going to do is we're going to destructure it and take X and Y, and we're going to go here, and this function is going to return a React element. So in this case, it returns the div. So now this is what we have with current mouse location, and for current mouse location, we're going to rename this here to current mouse location first and foremost. And this one's going to take in the children prop, and I'll show you what that means in just a second. And inside of here, what we're going to do is actually just get rid of this line here and get rid of this part here, because we still need this use effect and the coordinates. And for mouse tracker, you'll notice that this takes in a function. This function gets passed in as the children prop into current mouse location. So children over here is a function, and that is the function we are going to run. So instead of doing new component here, we are going to do children and then coords like that. And we no longer need to import React. So now that we've got that, we can go here and it works just fine. Now you notice this syntax is that we are using a React component. So current mouse location is a React component, and inside of there, we are running a function, and this function runs whenever current mouse location re-renders, and it returns this div with updated X and Y values. Now this won't have the same problem as we had last time, because let's just say that we wanted, say, a different set of mouse locations as well for some contrived example here, and we have two sets of X and Y. All we have to do is, assuming that these two values are different for some reason, then all we need to do is simply do X2 and then Y2 like that. If I can type it out, Y2, and then all we need to do is simply name this one X2, Y2, and destructure it differently. So that's all we have to do in order to get the new values. Now, obviously, these numbers here are the exact same because I'm using X and Y from the same current mouse location component, but you can imagine how that could potentially be different. So this is the render props pattern, and it essentially is just running a whole bunch of functions inside of one another to get the data that we need. Now, you might be able to see the major drawback to this solution, and the biggest drawback here is that you can end up with an insane amount of nesting. This can go in and in and in and in all the way in, and that can be a serious problem. The other issue here is that you cannot really integrate this with any other part of your component, because this has to go inside the return statement, which means that if you wanted to use X and Y here inside of the component itself, you're actually unable to do that, which is why, once again, React hooks is superior to this for a large number of reasons. So we're going to end the video here. I just wanted to show you how render props work, also known as function as a child. And in the next video, we're going to be rewriting this again to use React hooks, and I'm going to be explaining why that syntax is once again superior superior to both higher order components and also render props. This has been Lucas with Better Coding Academy, and see you guys later.